Most South Africans are slumping back into poverty as previous gains have been reversed since 2011. That's according to Statistics South Africa's Poverty Trends in South Africa, an examination of absolute poverty between 2006 and 2015. Reasons include anemic economic growth, stubbornly high unemployment, and educational outcomes failures. For policymakers and government, this diagnostic report raises deeply worrying questions about the continued pursuit of policies that fail to bring about change. Joining us in the studio is Israel Mkhize, political economist at Bugi-Indaba Consulting. Good afternoon and thanks for joining us.
Thank you for having me, Colin.
Where did we go wrong as a country to arrive at this level of 30 million people living in poverty?
Well, I think you have to know that South Africa is trapped in what we call the middle income countries trap, where you have a high division, a Gini coefficient between the high earners, high income earners, that you'd have CEOs who earn in millions. Then you've got a growing middle class that draws salaries, but you find that they're also trapped. At this time, we've got about 78.9% growing the middle class bracket by indebtedness, dependence on debt. Then you've got what you can call a left behind class or group, which usually in the middle income countries finds that they are huge on a lot in terms of population. Hence, you have 17 million in our case, which is dependent on grants. Then you've got 30 million. The other 30, from 17 to 30.2, those are the dependents from those who are earning the social income grants. So to get to that point, it's really because the policies that have come, they've come in increment, whereas someone would say we would have done well to have a policy framework that integrates RDP, GEAR, ASGISA maybe, all of them being well integrated to respond to these different sectors so that they consolidate sort of a national development plan.
But one would say there were poverty alleviation programs. For example, we used to hear of food parcels being given to people. I wonder if the timing of that was only during the build-up towards elections.
Not necessarily. There have been growth programs, but the problem is what they produce is that there becomes a high demand on the national revenue, where you find that for that group, that bracket of the poor, so to speak, who must receive the grants, those grants must come from somewhere. So you also have to entertain business and create a conducive business environment so that the state can have the revenue to pump money into the social security net. But in our case, you then have a need to concentrate. Not only, you can say for a certain period you'll have a social security net for income grants, but you need to have a program that transforms those people to graduate out of social net dependency, perhaps into becoming active and productive economics.
But why do we have pro-poor policies? But on the other hand, we have unemployment numbers going up.
Well, all in middle-income countries have very deep contradictions. But on this case, I cannot blame it on that system. It's some of the policy choices that have been made, which are absolutely I wouldn't say unfortunate, but obviously the poverty leaning has to do with the historical evolution of the South African economy, that it was demarcated to a particular small minority of group. Hence, when you look at the high earners, the 12% population earns, say, just over 54 of the GDP of the country. And the 54 population, which is at the bottom low, earns quite low, even not over 30% of the GDP of the country. So you have those contradictions. So what you then need to do is that while you have pro-poor policies, they must not be designed in a way that they sustain this dependency economy for the poor. You may start from a developmental state, but you should also target development together with growth, because that's what, at the end of the day, will create more revenue to be able to finance the social net.
But why do you think there's a problem with shared growth? Because I would believe that if we are having a shared growth type of policy, then you would have poverty alleviation programs getting people out of poverty through the education system, through the employment policy. And it seems like when I was doing a feature about the privileges that white South Africans have in the country, I came across people who were saying that when you talk about the middle class in South Africa, you're actually talking about people who are highly indebted. So they are only middle class by default. If they live from one paycheck away from poverty, then you cannot actually technically define them as middle class.
The problem is that we have economic density highly concentrated in two provinces in the main. You've got your Gauteng and you've got your Western Cape, where the income earners, they are above the 76.2% or to 76.6%. Those people are the drawers of salary from income. And the other provinces, particularly the Eastern Cape, the Northwest, most of the percentage of the income of the household comes from where? From grants. So you need to de-urbanize the economy. Try to take it out of these two highly concentrated provinces, which is the Western Cape and then Gauteng, so that you send the jobs back to where people come from. Otherwise, what you're going to have is you're going to have high levels of migration from these other 6 provinces migrating into these two provinces.
So what about the private sector doing? Because one would argue that if the private sector also decentralized, for example, if you are having a big corporation that has huge skyscrapers in Sandton, if actually they made sure that they had branches throughout the provinces and in municipalities, then you would at least decentralize the economy and de-urbanize.
Of course, that decentralization process must also be met with the skills match. You cannot decentralize into places where you will not have sufficient skills, to sustain production and profitability. Hence, you find that the private sector uses a skeptic engagement towards the development of the economy. They say you're going to wait and see. Hence, we've been decrying that there's huge monies that are saved in the banks. There's too much liquidity, which should be thrown back into the economy. So what you need to do, the side of the government would need to spend and play more role in terms of upscaling, whether it's through the short-term, your artisans, or the sort of long-term between tertiary and higher skills. Then the private sector will have the ground to play. And also, this notion of the 4 factors of production is what I've been talking about lately, that land, capital, entrepreneurship, those 3, unfortunately, are controlled by the minority, highly capitalized sector of our society, which in the main, the formerly enfranchised group of our society. Then the labor is highly supplied by the majority of the population, which is previously disenfranchised. So the supply and demand curve is determined by those who have been previously advantaged. So they can control the supply or the demand of the skills. And then when they see that we don't have the skills that we want, they can migrate to technology and just use technology.
I know that my time is up, and pardon me, my director, I just want to have a parting shot with you. We have a widening gap of inequality where the richer keep on getting rich, the rich keep on getting richer, and the poor get poorer. So then, because the theme of our interview right now is alleviating poverty in South Africa, can we really alleviate it?
We can. We need solidarity in South Africa. Those who are rich, those who have, must be patriotic, have solidarity towards those who do not have, and the state must tighten the monitoring and evaluation mechanisms, because programs are there, the NTP is there, although when it was released, it was released just before census, and other factors and stats have come forward which would be important for them to have incorporated in the diagnosis and the suggestions. But we need patriotism, a lot of it actually, and then we need a tightening on the monitoring and evaluation, because we do have the programs, there is the money, it's just that there is that will gap, which I can call it, between those who should be agents of transformation and those for whom transformation should take place.
All right. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, sir.
Right, that's Israel Mkhize, political economist at Bugi-Indaba Consulting, talking about poverty alleviation in South Africa.